great, and then we can get started. Still waiting. I think there's some latency issues. Cool. We're going to get started now. To introduce myself, hi, I'm Nachi. I am with Axel Venture Development Team, and I'm also one of the members of productgrowth.org. I'm sure everyone here knows what productgrowth.org by now, but just to give you a quick blurb, we really wanted to create a learning and a sharing community for people behind high growth startups. The funders and the fundraisers get a lot of press, a lot of knowledge bleed through there, but it's also really a tough gig to build a high growth startup. And in that means there's a lot of knowledge that is required, and the product growth field is ever evolving, ever changing. New dynamics are being discovered, being tried and experimented with. So that's why we wanted to shed some light and stories of people who work behind these highly successful companies. In that vein, we've been doing a bunch of masterclasses, and welcome to our first and inaugural Ask Me Anything. Over masterclasses, we try to understand the playbooks of leaders and experiment behind companies like Swiggy, Uber, Lyft, and Bounce. But one other aspect we wanted to focus on with Ask Me Anything is like a free-form Q&A where we can get our inner curiosities answers from experts who we look up to. In that vein, I would like to introduce Anshumani Ruddra. He's currently the VP of product at Hotstar, and I'll go into his career in a bit. Hi Anshumani, welcome to our live AMA. How are you doing?
Hi everyone. Hi Nachi, how are you doing? And hi everyone, good to be here.
Perfect. Hey, so Anshumani, just to tell you, we have a bunch of people live right now watching the AMA. We're coinciding this well. We collected a lot of questions beforehand. So as I was telling you backstage, I'll start with some of the questions that we collected from the community. In some cases, I'll be reading out their names out loud as well. And then later on, we would be going to Slido, where we'll be looking at some questions that people post or upvote right now. And if you want to post or view a question, you can go to sli.do, sli.do or slido.com with the code PGAMA. I'm sorry, I'm just going to change the caption real quick. So it's PGAMA, not PG Rocks. So you can just say PGAMA. So I am going to get started just to get the ball rolling, Anshumani. Congrats on the recent launches. I think you just launched a Disney Plus during these stressful times. Quite an incredible journey you've had with Hotstar. I remember us talking about the IPL launch a while ago, way long ago, which was like the crown jewel of Hotstar in the early stages, and to all the way to coming and launching some of the best premium content available on the internet. How has the recent event shaped how you ship product, especially during this lockdown, during this pandemic?
So, it goes without saying it's been difficult, but we are incredibly lucky in the fact that we were already a bit decentralized in the way we worked. We had teams working out of Bombay, out of Delhi, out of Bangalore and Beijing. So the moment this happened, we were able to sort of very seamlessly work from home, right? And we're sure there are disruptions, but I think at least on the product design and engineering side, there haven't been that many disruptions. We've sort of found our rhythm, right? We've found ways to be efficient and effective and sort of strike the right balance. And that's been, it takes a lot of effort. I think we are constantly on Zoom, right? And a lot more meetings than we would have, I would have liked. But I think work's sort of slowly getting back to normal. I think we've hit the right rhythm. People are getting used to this, so which is good. I don't think every organization has the, I wouldn't say the ability, but they might not be in the kind of business where it's easy to move to a scenario like this. So that's been great. So I mean, kudos to the team for being able to release Disney Plus in India during the lockdown, right? It's a massive, massive undertaking, and the teams working on it were working tirelessly for months. Phenomenal stuff, just amazing stuff.
And I can imagine, because for a launch like this to come to life, it requires collaboration across multiple disciplines. And usually, when you're in the same location, we used to call this job herding cats. It's to get them aligned, synced up, kind of firing on all cylinders back to back is what's key for a mega launch like this. Which involves product managers being able to hustle, and on a real time in a co-located space. We tend to go talk to each department and keep them synced up. But doing it over remote, how has Hotstar been dealing with these key decision points or key inflection points during a product release process, especially when they're remote?
Yeah, so I think there are two aspects of it, right? There's sort of the very formalized aspect of, if you think of it, product managers are the glue that hold the company together, right? That hold sort of the strategy, the tactics, and the execution together. So from that perspective, a product manager has to be connected across functions to everyone. It's much easier if you're all located in the same place. As I said, for some of us, we were always located in different places, so that already used to happen online, right? But your dependence on tools like Slack, etc., and Zoom really goes up, right? Because you still want to have all those meetings, you still want to ensure that everyone is on the same page. You have to learn how to over-communicate. It's very, very critical that you over-communicate and make sure that everyone is on the same page. So I think that's sort of the key, right? In terms of there is a part of product management which is just project managing stuff and just making sure that everyone is aligned. Everyone understands why the decision has been made the way it has been made. And I think that's been sort of the bedrock on which most of our work's been happening over the last few months. And I think it will continue being that way. But yeah, I think it's a difficult time to be a product manager. There are other aspects of product management which are far softer skills. The classic water cooler conversations cannot really happen. I think the biggest drawback right now is that you can't really meet your users. For a lot of businesses, for a lot of different types of products, I think one of the key things is for a product manager or a designer to be out and about. Right. Mm-hmm. So if you're in healthcare, if you're in education, you're in any kind of direct-to-consumer product, or if you're in a B2B product, you're in an enterprise product, right? It's very critical that you meet your users, your customers, right? And that's the one big miss, right, which is happening, because the people for whom you might be making the product need not be tech savvy, need not be people who come on Zoom and give you an interview and tell you about their experience of using your app, right? And it's not the same. It's not the same. That observational side of things is going to take a beating. User research is going to be difficult. I think just sort of the direct feedback that you can. Yeah.
Actually, I have a follow-up question on that. Especially, this is a question from Amit Godbole. Hi, Amit. He's joining us from Pune. He actually runs Product Tank in Pune. So his question is exactly what you're talking about. While working remotely, how's the process of product discovery and user research working, and how are we able to do that? Can you share some insights on what are the best ways going forward?
So I think, well, one is the hope that this lockdown will end and that life within a few months will come back to normal. I think nothing beats one-on-one sort of in-person meetings, right? It's very, very critical for PMs and designers to meet the people for whom they're building products. I don't think that will get replaced. I think that's one aspect where I don't think technology has a solution really, right? So there are a lot of tools available out there for doing user research online, right? We could have always done, recorded conversations with people. We could have always observed what they were seeing. Remote observations always work. And of course, things like surveys still work. I think user interviews can still be conducted, but they would lack a certain nuance, right? Which sadly technology cannot overcome right now. So I think we have to take it with not a pinch, but maybe a bucket load of salt, right? We have to be prepared for the fact that information which will come to us in this way is going to be, it will get automatically filtered in a lot of ways, and maybe in the wrong ways. So we have to live with that reality. Uh, I think user researchers will find it difficult to sort of. There are some user research methods which will work really well, right? But there are some which won't. So I think we'll have to just get used to this new normal. But I think, having said that, the biggest thing is not to lose the discipline, right? So I think talking to your customers is still important. Talking to your users is still important, right? Conducting those surveys, doing those one-on-one interviews is still important. You will still get insights from them. Those insights will still be valuable, right? So we should not stop that process, for sure.
So true. And one of the things I've also seen in the past is if your customers, if they love your product or hate your product, they tend to be very vocal about it. And I think it's the art of product management.
If you're lucky, they'll be very vocal about it.
Yeah, I mean the dangerous part is the mad zone in between.
Oh yeah. The worst thing that can happen to you is a customer who doesn't give you feedback, right? So either you get very negative feedback, and that's also good because that sort of clearly tells you what your roadmap should be, right? It tells you what not to do. It tells you what to do. And once in a while, if you get some bouquets, you also know, okay, this thing that we did worked well, so we should continue doing this, right? But if you don't have customers who are telling you anything, it's you're in for a world of trouble.
Yeah. So doubling down on some of the research methods you talked about, like what will work. I think I'll expand upon that. It's like maybe let's talk about data collection and making data-driven decisions. User research, qualitative data. During these times, what are some of the tactical ways of making high frequency decisions in a high demand environment? How has it worked for you? What are some of the tweaks or tips that you have found useful?
No, I think, see, your decisions have to be built both on top of qualitative as well as quantitative research, and of course your own understanding of the market, your own understanding of your users, right, and your own business needs, right? All those things will continue remaining true. But I think just from a pure metrics perspective, right, the quantitative side of things, it's super critical to be, again, I think the word that I would use a lot is discipline, right? It's about understanding the health of your product, right? It's sort of a very diagnostical tool, right? People have a very poor understanding of metrics in general. I think across orgs I've seen, some of the smartest people you'd meet would still not have a very good grasp of what important metrics are, right? They would look at lagging metrics, right? Things which take effect. You did something 3 months back and they're showing effect now, and you're looking at them and they're giving you all sorts of mixed messages, right? I think it's very critical to look at leading metrics. So the challenge that I always throw open to PMs is that what are the set of, so you come into office or you open up your laptop first thing in the morning, what are the 3 or 4 things that you want to look at to know that your product did well yesterday, that things were fine, your product is not dead, your product is alive, it's kicking, it's thriving, right? So essentially, if I was a patient and I walk into a hospital and I meet a doctor, what are the quick set of things that the doctor takes my temperature, takes my blood pressure, measures my weight and height, right? Gets a sense, asks me a few questions, right? What is the equivalent of that for your product, right? So a basic health metrics dashboard. And of course, then you can sort of double click on that and go much deeper into each of those line items, right? But everyone should do this mental exercise. What are the things which tell you your product is healthy, right? And the answers that we usually get are things like, oh, I look at daily active users. And my usual follow-up question is, what defines active? So suppose you have an app, you have a consumer app. Does app open define a user as an active user? So essentially then you're saying DAU is the number of unique people who opened my app yesterday, but they didn't do anything in your app, right? Some of them might have opened it by mistake. They opened it and then they quickly shut it down, right? So this activity, the fact that you had DAU is not telling you whether your product is healthy or not, right? So should it be a ratio? Should it be the number of times an average user opened up your app, or define activity properly. So for us, the activity would be, did the user open the Hotstar app and actually watch a video? So he's not just a daily active user, but he's a daily video viewer, right? And then how long did they watch the video, right? And this tells you that, okay, my app is a video app, and these are the number of people who saw a video, right? So at least the basic reason for which my app exists is being served, right? So this is very critical, right? How many people started an e-commerce journey is critical, right? How many people surfed a product, who clicked on a product, added something to their cart, right? Or searched for something in the toolbox. So what are the activities that people do? So if you're an e-commerce product, there are different ways in which you could define your daily active user, right? And then you could look at different parts of that funnel and then say, okay, these are the number of people who came inside and looked at a product's page through various ways. They either searched for it or they clicked something that they saw on the homepage, but they went to a product page. And that's that is what I define as the minimum activity that I consider relevant for my e-commerce app or my e-commerce website. So again, what are these top 3-4 things which define the health of your product? And you know that these are things that you want to look in and day out, hour to hour, because if any one of these goes bust, then you know what is it that now you have to sort of enter triage mode, right? You have to figure out what is wrong, why is it wrong, right? So yeah, I think that's the sort of the key to looking at metrics and building that discipline of looking at these things. But a lot of people fall for the trap of looking at a lot of metrics. So they have these very exquisite dashboards, 300 different variables on it that they're tracking, events that they're tracking day in and day out. And there are beautiful trend lines, and there's area under the graph charts. All these things don't tell you anything, right? You have to sort of
the data, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's just data for the sake of data, right? You should be able to sort of boil it down to like, okay, percentage of users who did this activity, right? So if you've built a feature, right, which you would like 20% of your users to use on a daily basis, if on any day it's below 20%, then something is wrong. Mm-hmm. But again, I would always ask you the question, why 20%, right? Why is 20% a healthy number and not 30% or 40%? Why is 20% not a failure? Why are 100% of your users not doing this? So I think this is an exercise every business and every product manager has to do for their specific product, right? There are a lot of available metrics, and the good thing is that there are certain common. So if you're a SaaS business, there are certain things you should look at. If you're an enterprise product, there are certain things you should look at. If you're a direct-to-consumer product, there are certain standard metrics that you can look at, right? But over and above those, you have to evolve. You have to evolve your own methodology to look at metrics.
That's awesome. I think to summarize it a little bit tighter, I would say, if you're a product owner out there, just distill your product down into what we call as pulse of the product, where you can quickly learn about the overall health. And then when something perks up or down, just double click on it to see. Don't overdo the data. It's almost, and make sure that the things you're measuring are etched in the customer's reality, not what we want to measure, but what the customer is doing on the app, where it works.
Correct.
Absolutely. I think this is. I think we'll come back to the metrics parts in a bit of time. We have a lot of questions around that people have posted. But we'll shift to something different right now. And before I go there, it is customary to ask this question during AMA: 1,000 duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck? Which one would you?
1,000 duck-sized horses, always.
Why?
Always. Power in numbers. Power in numbers. If the world of storytelling teaches you one thing, monsters are easy to slay. In fact, the larger the monster, the easier it is to slay. So a horse-sized duck, while very powerful and capable of doing a lot of damage, is still a duck and is fairly easy to beat if you have the right tools, right?
Nice.
1,000 duck-sized horses could be a handful, right? And could band together. Suddenly there's a intelligent alien invasion and That's a group of 1,000 very sort of highly motivated individuals coming after you. They might be small, but they are numerous. So always that.
Looks like the game designer in you is coming out a little bit here.
Oh yeah. It's like I mean, I don't know how many people here would have played, Age of Empires, right? And in these old school sort of games, your villagers. One of the easiest ways to actually win a regicide or a 1 versus 1 thing used to be that you could win the game in pretty much the first 3.5-4 minutes, which is you just make like 10 villagers and go attack the other person's castle. And you'd be surprised, people are sitting, farming and making walls and whatnot, and your 10 villagers, not even soldiers, 10 villagers would just go and destroy a castle and kill the king, and you would win the game. And everyone would be like, what just happened? Who takes villagers and attacks, right? And so yeah, I think some of the most classic sort of tournaments have, even in other in StarCraft, I remember there's this very classic final match in a very famous tournament in South Korea, which ended this way, where the guy used like sort of the most underpowered units, but just made lots of them and just did like a blitzkrieg attack and just destroyed his opponents in like a matter of minutes. When the game started, everyone expected attacks to happen like 20 minutes in, but
yeah,
who expects an attack?
Showed up different. This guy just said, "Hey, the best defense is a strong first offense."
Absolutely.
Abhisha says, "Yes, rushing. That strategy always works." And I play Counter Strike, and it's similar. Some of the best teams I know, they just rush B in the first 2 rounds. Nobody knows what hit them.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think let me take you back to your early days then, which is a good segue from here. If I remember correctly, in 2014, you and your team had won the Game of the Year award at GDC for Dadis versus Jellies.
Correct. Dadi versus Jellies. Yes.
Dadi versus Jellies. Yes. And so, how did you go from award-winning game designer, to a product manager into and becoming a product leader? What was your transition into product like? How did it happen?
So, I've had a strange journey into product management, right? So, started out, I'm an engineer who became an author and then became a children's author, more specifically, then became a screenwriter, then became a game designer, then became an executive, a studio head, sort of a general manager, then moved into product management. And now I've been in product management for a while. I don't know what's next, but I'm the classic sort of example of jack of all trades, master of none. Right?
I think most of us can relate to that.
Yeah. And I think, my wife always asks me this question, right? It's a very interesting way of looking at people, right? Everyone has a superpower. Everyone has some superpower or the other. And she says, what is your superpower? And I keep telling her my only superpower is I can get along with anyone, right? My adaptability is my biggest superpower. So, you put me in a room full of engineers and I can sort of work my way through them and understand what they're talking about and sort of even learn a lot from them, of course, but even maybe contribute like 0.1% to their thinking of the world, right? Put me in a room of PMs and I'm happy. Of course, I'm very happy. Put me in a room of game designers, I'm very happy. Put me in a room of gamers, I'm happy, right? Put me in a room of writers and I can sort of... So I think the only superpower I have, right, is my adaptability. And I think that actually is why I'm I don't know about successful or not, but why I think I've done well as a PM is that. And I think it's a core skill for PMs to have. PMs need to be extremely adaptable. Product managers, product owners, people who build things should be adaptable. Right? There's a certain rigidity.
There's the whole multidisciplinary frame of mind, like having
absolutely right. Like I think it's a breadth first approach as opposed to a depth first approach. I think depth is very, very important and depth has to be built over time. So I don't want anyone listening to this to take it to heart that you have to become a jack of all trades and not become a master of anything. That's not what I'm proposing.
A lot of people allude to this whole T-shape, like having broad enough depth and enough breadth.
Yeah. The issue is that there are very few people who are lucky enough to have figured out their depth very, very fast, like what to go deep on. Right, so they'll start off. sort of the Tiger Woods of the world who at sort of 2.5, 3 are playing golf, right? Sadly I'm not that. I think a lot of people are not that, right? Like it takes us a long time. And our society has these extremely false constructs that you have to figure out who you want to be at 18 when you enter college, right? So you should have decided, okay, I'm going to be pre-med or I'm going to go into engineering because, I have a path ahead of me. We're going to live a very long life. Lifespans are already beyond 80. For kids being born today, their lifespans are going to be around 95, 100. And human lifespan will keep growing bigger and bigger. People are not going to retire so fast. I think a retirement age of 50 and 58 and 60 is a pipe dream. So the reality is that you will have to continuously change who you are, right? And you cannot be beholden to decisions you made as a stupid, foolish 18-year-old kid, right? Like, I mean, I was a stupid, foolish 18-year-old kid. I had no idea what I was doing, right? I'm a stupid, foolish 37-year-old, right? And I'd love to be that way, right? The fact is, you take the decisions based on the things that are around you, right? The context that you have. And you sort of adapt yourself to those. So for a lot of us, the reason we have to go breadth first is because we need to figure out areas where we can potentially build depth, right? Lucky are the few who know where they want to build depth, right? Lucky are the few who know that, hey, I want to be the best game designer in the world, or I just want to sort of be an epidemiologist, right? Or who would be very successful right now and would be much in demand, right? Or somebody who says, you know what, I just want to code because coding is amazing, coding is beautiful, and all I want to do for the rest of my life is code, right? And at different stages of my life, right, I remember in class 8th or 9th being completely obsessed with biology and was very sure that I wanted to be a doctor. And then in class 11th was very sure that what I wanted to be was a mathematician. And then being extremely sure at some point in my life that, all I wanted to do was play games and make games, right? But these things change. You sort of keep evolving. And I hope, I keep evolving. I hope that I'm this way even when I'm 87. Right, fingers crossed.
So
right.
one follow-up, I'm seeing it from the chat. Abhi Shah, what do you think of this framework having a 2-year window to evaluate? Okay, this is what I'm going to try for these 2 years, and then either double down or go broadly from every 2 years. What do you think about that?
See, what is important is that you have a framework. Mm-hmm. What that framework is actually irrelevant. Frameworks are like tools, right? Like, you could have a really, really sophisticated ticketing system, or you could have a Google Doc. And there are teams who will make Google Docs work wonders and produce great products. And there'll be teams who will have Jira and whatnot, and every latest sort of productivity hack. So frameworks are like that, right? The framework has to fit you. Mm-hmm. I can make a Google Doc work for me and my team, right? And then there are people who do wonders with Jira and with everything else, right? Like it's about what framework fits you and how well you're able to adopt it, right? So whether it's a look at your life in chunks of 2 years and say, okay, for these 2 years, I'm going to do XYZ, and then I'm going to see if XYZ fits me. That's a great framework, right? It's a great framework if it works for you, right? And it works for you is, when I say it works for you, I'm not talking about the results which come out of the framework. I'm talking about the fact that you are able to stick to the framework, right? So each one of us has to sort of evolve a framework that fits well to us, and then just stick to it and see what happens.
I think there's a lot of self-awareness.
Yeah, and of course you have to keep reality in mind, right? Like at some point you'll have to make money, you have to make ends meet, you have to pay bills, you have to make rent, you have to take care of your family, right? You'll have other obligations, sure. So you should do things which sort of, the things you're good at, things for which people think you're good at, and things for which people will pay you money. And of course, things from which you derive satisfaction, right? And sort of the intersection of all these, right?
Get your ikigai as fast as possible.
Ikigai as fast as possible. But it's sort of a fool's dream. It's a very Don Quixotic dream, sort of, right? Chasing windmills. You can't have the best of all worlds, right? So sometimes you're like, I'm good at this, and people are ready to pay me money for it. And while I'm doing this, I will try and figure out something that I also enjoy doing. Right? That's the,
I think almost
you have
pleasure of your
it's like
out of your work.
Absolutely. You have extremely good lung capacity, and people are ready to pay you money to be their guide all the way up to the Everest. Do that. You might not enjoy mountain climbing, but at least you'll take a lot of people to the top of the peak, right? And then perhaps during that process, you will figure something out. You might realize that, hey, I could use the same skills perhaps to, go deep sea diving.
Nice. Well put. I think the earlier thing you're talking about, developing, but I remember one of the tweets that one of your more recent tweets, which was about a book called Range. I think
Yes.
Range definitely talks about developing that breadth first, the algorithm, and then going deep. And that's how they say how generalists survive in the world of a specialist.
Yeah.
And if anybody out there is looking for a good book on that topic, definitely would suggest Range. Go on Twitter and you will find a lot of people talk about it.
Correct. David Epstein's book, yeah. Range.
Yeah, David Epstein, great book. It's a New York Times bestseller too, I think.
Yep.
So again, I want to double down on something else, I think, and this is a very common question we've gotten from our community members as well. Is how do you transition from a non-tech background to a product management role? Because traditionally speaking, and if you distribute it normally, a lot of people transition from an engineering or even like a business role or a business traditionally educated in like having an MBA into a product management role. But there are people who are transitioning from non-tech to what are the how does one do that? What is the best way to go about it, in your opinion?
So sadly, no good answers, right? Okay, so in the tech industry, there's a massive preference for PMs with tech backgrounds, right? So anyone who's coded before, spent a couple of years coding, then did an MBA, and then became a PM, right? That's sort of the classic PMing path that a lot of PMs take. But here's the weird part, right? Nobody expects PMs to code. Nobody expects PMs to even look at code, right? The expectation is that a PM can speak to engineers. So the skill set that is required is, can you work with engineers? When you lay out a roadmap, are you able to talk to your engineering counterparts and understand what they're trying to tell you? So they're trying to tell you, hey, this is a stack that we'll use. This is what we plan to build. But given what you have told us, this is going to take us 6 weeks. And then you're like, whoa, business requires us to deliver this in 3, right? So can then you reduce the scope of what you want to build or reduce the complexity of what you're trying to build and still get something out, right? So do you understand engineering limitations? Do you appreciate first and understand what engineers do, right? Which is not the same as you being able to write the same algorithms as them, right? That's not a skill set that's required, right? So it's not like, oh, you should be able to pass an engineering round. No, like as a PM, you're never going to do quick sort, right? It's just not going to happen, right? There is a very specific kind of a PM, which is a technical PM, right? On products which are extremely technical, right? Where the PM needs to have great domain expertise, right? So suppose you're a PM in ad tech, and your primary job is to build ad servers, right? I won't be a good fit there. Like, I think I'm smart enough to learn how an ad server is built, and I'm sure I can go and talk to people who build ad servers and engineers who work in ad tech and understand. But if you are launching your ad tech product, you're not going to hire me as a PM. You shouldn't. And neither would I venture and say, okay, I'm going to build this out for you, right? Because it's not my core competency and it's a very, very specialized thing, right? Once you've done it, right? And of course, even those guys did not start out as being ad tech PMs. What they had, the skill set that they had, was that they were extremely technical, right? And they could go very deep into understanding that specific kind of product, right? And build on it, right? So it's an acquired skill. So where non-technical people will always struggle is this. By the way, some of the best PMs I've worked with over the years were non-tech people. Never did a day of coding, right? Did bachelor's in commerce, then did an MBA, or started out in in completely different domains like sales and marketing, and at some point got lucky, worked in an organization which allowed them to transition into a product role, or just happened to be in an early stage startup where everyone said, hey, nobody has any expertise here, everyone has to do a bit of everything, and suddenly realized that they were the head of product for a really amazing, beautiful product that they'd slaved and worked for 4 or 5 years, right? And I keep telling, see, you go to school for becoming an engineer and becoming a developer, and there is a well understood sort of curricula which exists outside in the world, right? Like today, if a 16-year-old comes up to you or me and says, I want to go and work for Facebook, there is a path that you can assign to him and say, hey, do this, right? And if you're really, really good at it, you'd get a job at Facebook or Google or whatever, right? ByteDance, whatever. That's very difficult to give somebody that path as a product manager. PMing is one of those things which it's a little bit like lying, right? It's the job of being a con artist. You sort of first day go in and say, hi, I am your product manager, right? And you say it without any conviction, and even the guys standing in front of you are like, wow, seriously, this guy is our product manager? And you do this for 10 years. It's like you face the mirror every day and you say, I'm a product manager. And at some point you say it with such amazing conviction in a room full of people that everyone's like, this guy is a PM. It's absolutely that. And I don't want to sound frivolous about it, but what I'm essentially saying is that with every day that you do the job of a PM, you become a PM. That's not necessarily true of a lot of other professions. Right? Sure, you are a coder if you code every single day, and you're a designer if you design every single day. But the thing is, there was some level of grounding and framework that sort of got you to that space. With PMing, sure, you could say, okay, I have a very analytical bent of mind. I'm very artistic. I'm extremely creative. I am very strategic in my thinking. I'm great at user research. All these hundreds of I'm very good at project managing. I can work across functions. I understand what engineers do. All these are different skill sets. But unless they all come together on that day when you start building something, or you launch something, or you run a live product, that is the day you become a PM. You are a PM the first day you enter your job, and at the end of the day, you have met a bunch of people, and the first time there's a release which happens based on a document that you wrote or something that you whiteboarded, then you're a PM. And every single day that you keep doing that, what started out as a lie or what started out as a myth in your head becomes reality. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah, I am the hero. I am the hero that will slay the dragon. You keep saying that to yourself enough, eventually you are the hero who will slay the dragon.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of self-belief, self-awareness that builds out, and just hustle it as long as you enjoy doing it. That's like combining the last two. And
yeah.
Nice. I think this is also I think a lot of questions, especially.
And I think somewhere in there, so just to sort of come to that answer, right? How do you transition? And there are actually only two well-known ways of transitioning from a non-tech background to a PMing role. Either you work at a very large company, which is open to the idea of people transitioning from one function to another, and you have built great amount of credibility in the function you're currently at. So you're a very well, you're a sales or a marketing guy, and everyone respects what you do. And then you say, what, I would like to move into PMing. Please help me become a PM. And your organization doesn't want to lose you, so they set that path for you. This happens at really large organizations, happens all the time at some of the large tech companies. That's one way, but it requires you to have great credibility in one domain before you can make the jump to another domain. The only other way this happens is at the exact opposite end of the spectrum, which is a very, very early stage company. Either you are the founder, or you are part of the founding team of a startup, or you are the first person who says, I will do everything. I will bring coffee in the morning. I will clean the whiteboard, and then I will fill up the whiteboard with what we are going to build. I will sit with engineers. If my engineer does not wake up on time, I will go on my bike, pick up my engineer, and bring him to work. That, by the way, is a real story of one of my favorite product managers who used to go every day in the morning and wake up my most important engineer, who was lazy as hell. Right? And imagine this, right? Like imagine me begging you that, dude, can you do this job first thing in the morning, 9 a.m. in the morning, just go wake up this guy, bring him, we'll all have breakfast together, right? And this guy did it. This guy did it for a year and shipped great products because he kept this engineer honest.
Wow. I mean,
So
the worst I've done is bought smokes from engineers for an overnight hackathon.
oh, that's way down the pyramid, my friend. Way down the totem pole of all the things that PMs have to do for their teams, right? So, which is what a PM has to be extremely resourceful, right? Get the job done. The only sacrosanct thing in the PMing world is, did you get the job done?
Yeah.
Right? And it's not that you can't even say you had one job. You did not have one job. You had hundreds of jobs, but did you get all of them done?
Done.
And if you got all of them done, you are a PM, right? So get yourself in one of these two situations. Either you have great credibility in one domain, and your company and your organization is more than happy to support your journey to the other side, right? Including, say, sponsoring your MBA, or you join at the bottom of the rung at an early stage company and work your way through it.
Nice. So
the third is my journey, which is you have to be incredibly lucky.
that was an escapism. I was going to come to that. Which is, I think this is a question from Jagtap as a follow-up. It is, what was the day you went into a mirror and said, "I'm going to be a PM," or "I'm a PM now"? What was that trigger, or when did that happen, and what was the trigger?
Somebody else did that for me. So I remember one of my favorite PMs. In fact, one of the people who hired me at Zynga as a game designer. So Zynga India started. Zynga India started a studio. They had no game designers. There was no concept of game designers in India when all of this was happening. There were a bunch of people who played games. There were a bunch of us who used to code games back in the day, or used to play board games and make board games. And I was a writer of writing kids' books. So a very close friend convinced me, and another one of the PMs essentially interviewed me, and they convinced me to join. And I remember about 6-7 months into the job, in this review meeting, something was happening, and we were training the incoming class of product managers, and I was assigned a big chunk of that training program. And it was a very strange thing. And I remember the head of Zynga India asked my colleagues, you want Anshu training our PMs? And it's a big deal, by the way. Product management at Zynga is a very, very big deal, right? We had some of the best product managers, and I learned obviously from them. And they said, yeah, Anshu could be a PM. Like, it was just a passing statement. It was said as a joke, right? It was mirth. We were all laughing and sitting at a table. Like, yeah, of course, Anshu could be a PM. He can talk the PMing talk, right? And he can get the job done. And it was very strange. It was one of those surreal moments because, my colleague said it and I laughed at it. And then that evening I went back and said, wow, perhaps last 6-7 months while I've been doing game design work, perhaps I've been doing a little bit of product management work also, right? I think that gave me the first sort of, and again, this also happens because of breadth. Because I had I had always invested a lot in breadth. I never thought that, design is supposed to be on one end of the spectrum and I can't do what PMs do. So I used to talk about numbers. I used to build dashboards. I used to write my SQL queries, right? So because you do everything and then you suddenly realize, you know what? Okay, sure. I can also do this. So I think that was probably the first time I looked into an imaginary mirror and perhaps said, oh, I could be a PM. What's the big deal, right? And I think, which is why I always say that, for me, it's just luck and hubris, which has brought me all the way here.
Well, what you call confidence.
Yes, exactly what most people call confidence, which has that word con in it. Con artist is a confidence artist, right? So I think the biggest job, your biggest con job that you'll pull is to convince yourself that you are capable of doing something. And once you start doing it, then it's no longer a con job. And it's reality.
Quickly, when was the day you went into a room and said, I'm a PM, and you said it with so much conviction, everybody believed it? When did that happen?
That's an interesting one. I don't know when people started looking at me as a PM.
Did you have so much conviction that you knew you're a product guy?
Oh, when I ventured to start like my own thing, I was like, okay, I'm going to run a game studio. All I know is how to make a game, and sure, I know about game design. I don't know anything about strategy and anything about running a studio and sort of hiring a team and building out a team. Uh, I would be responsible for pretty much hiring everyone, building out the product function, building out the game design function. So when I was leaving Zynga India, I left with the conviction that yes, I can do it. And again, it was because of the faith shown in me by mentors and by people sort of who said, dude, you can do this. And again, it was a very good confidence trick from their side when they told me that they thought I was capable of doing it. And I'm like, wow, okay, if people think I'm capable of doing this, then I must be, right? How can they be wrong? They are seldom wrong.
Nice.
Again, so which is why I think my path is, I always tell people that, people ask me these questions and I said, look, I just got lucky. I've been incredibly lucky. I did a few right things, sure. But my path is difficult to follow, mostly because I know the path that other people have taken successfully to this, but my path just requires you to have a lot of providence on your side.
Wow, nice. Well put. Amazingly put. So now I want to walk you down the memory lane again and take you back to some of your early successes and failures. Right. One of our members, Giridhar Sriram, if you're here, what was your experience while shipping your first product or feature, and how do you feel about it right now?
So interesting thing, right? So I joined Zynga India, and I used to measure my success in the number of books I had sold till that point. I was a children's writer. I used to travel across the country, go to schools, right? So my biggest sort of, just the year before I joined Zynga India, I had spent the year traveling to 109 schools across 13 cities in India.
Wow.
Meeting school children, reading from my book, and literally carrying my books in a sack, going and putting them on a table and hoping that some of them will buy it. And the book sold pretty well, considering that in India we don't have much of a book market. We are not much of a reading culture. It's a myth that we read a lot. We don't.
So that's why you moved to Hotstar. It's because we are a more video culture, or we are watching culture.
True. We've become a video culture, yes. But that experience was very valuable because I think that was, if you really think about it, a book is a type of a product. And as the creator of that book, as the writer of that book, you're essentially the product manager of the book, right? And to be truly honest, it's very difficult to just be the creator and say, I don't care about distribution. I don't care how this sells or who's going to sell it, right? You are sort of responsible for, in this modern day and age, you're sort of responsible for the entire journey. I think that without realizing it, that was perhaps my first product job, because now that it existed in the form of a book, I had to sort of go and sell it, right? And that happened, right? And that journey in that first year, in that year leading up to my first job, was essentially this. That confidence sort of came from that okay, yeah, I can. And then I land up at Zynga, right? This extremely beautiful engineering culture, great product managers, and I think I joined on a Monday. On a Tuesday, I wrote down the draft of a feature. We worked on it all week long, right? With the art team, the design team, the engineering team. It shipped the next Monday, and on the very first day, 500,000 people. We did a slow rollout. Right? It was an experiment. It was under a slow rollout. And about 500,000 people played it. And I was like, wow, I spent the last 1 year selling 10,000 books, going door to door, literally. And my reach, my distribution was sort of just that, right? And so there's a great analogy that people use, right? Like writers and sort of people who create things, they tend to think of the things that they build as their children, right?
Mm-hmm.
And mammals grow in a very linear way. You have a 9-month gestation cycle, then you have one kid. Then you take a few years off, you have another 9-month gestation cycle, you have another kid, right? So mammals can only grow so just that fast. You can't have 100 kids, right? Unless you're Gandhari.
The natural cycle.
Right. So the mammalian way of growing is very linear. And in fact, even like, and it's a good way of thinking about distribution. Your distribution is literally, so, where are your margins coming from, right? So literally every book that's printed, there's a marginal cost to printing that book and to warehousing it and to then selling it, right? And suddenly you come in a purely digital world of games, and there's barely any marginal cost to the millionth and first user and the millionth and second user, right? The distribution is, at that point, it was on Facebook, on the web, and there are these people who are coming and checking out your feature. They're spending time playing that feature. We built a quest system for a game called Fishville. It was a fish tank simulation on the lines of Farmville. That was one of the first games I worked in when I was at Zynga. Fishville, yeah. It was a very popular game, especially with kids and younger people. And a lot of parents played this game with their kids. And we built a quest system on top of it. And it was bonkers. And I had one of those moments where I just sat back and said, I spent 6.5 years writing books and struggling my way to my first sort of what was considered a bestseller because I had sold 10,000 copies of it. And here on literally day 8, I had 500,000 people playing something that I had just thought of last week. And that sort of suddenly realized that, okay, the mammalian way of thinking is limited in its approach. So you have to think like a dandelion. If you know how dandelions grow, right? Like their seeds just go all over the world, right? Millions of seeds. And even if there's a crack in a pavement, a dandelion seed would go there and that tree will come out after a few years, right? So you're just like, you're spreading yourself. Your distribution channel, when it's direct to consumer, is beautiful, right? And I don't know who came up with this analogy. I'm forgetting the name of the writer who came up with this analogy of sort of don't think the mammalian way. That's one form of distribution, but grow like a dandelion, which is a very different form of distribution, right? And in the digital world, that's how you grow, right? You build something, and tens of thousands and millions of people can sort of come and sample it. If you crack distribution, your reach is so much wider, right? And when this happened, this really broke my mind, right? Because I realized, wow, we've been doing things not incorrectly, but I wish I had known this earlier, right? And so since then, sort of that first 6.5-year journey, then over the next sort of 11 years has been about, wow, take these distribution channels and really how do you put content out there? How do you put your products out there? Things that you build and things in which you put your blood and sweat. And not just you, but a team of your 30, 40, 50 people, 500 people, right? How do you make sure that it reaches the right people for whom it is intended, and they take it and they use it, right? And then you feel joy. It's the same joy that I felt when I saw a kid picking up my book at a bookshelf and convincing his or her parents to buy it for them, right? And then actually write an email or drop a note on my website saying, hey, I loved reading your book. And now that sort of moves into, okay, 500,000 people or 1 million people or 10 million people. And I worked on games like Mafia Wars, which had millions and millions of users, right? Who are enjoying things that you're putting out there. And then just the concept of success and failure gets very muddled up though, right? Because there is success is in even that one single kid reading your book and appreciating it. And there's success in 1 million people playing a game that you've built. They're both successes, right? You just have to, the business lens when it is applied, of course, means different things, right? So there's a part of me, which is the designer part of me, which appreciates one single user really enjoying what I've built, right? And being delighted by what I've built. But there's the business product side of my brain, which enjoys the fact that, oh, millions of people have used this and spent money on it.
Wow, that's a lot to process. I think thank you for going so deep into the topic. I think I'm going to switch a little bit to more what we have as the general product management questions. Actually, you know what? Before I go there's one follow-up I'm just seeing here from Ankit. His question is a little bit more on the professional side, but I can broaden it. Like, how do you manage? We talk about successes a lot, but and cracking distribution and everything. But how did you manage failures? I'm sure it's not all bed of roses at all.
Absolutely.
Both at the product level and even at a professional level. I think when they say professional level, he's alluding to career failures. Like, I fucked it up, or maybe I did not hit my numbers, or I'm not considered the best in my business. So how did you handle both the product level failures and professional level failures?
So if you strongly believe that you will not make the same mistake again. And by the way, that requires like a dog-headedness, like a little bit of there's a little bit of a jerk inside you which needs to be there, which says that I will not make the same mistake again. I will make other mistakes, right? So then if you have that very, very deeply sort of stuck in your head, then you look at every failure as an opportunity to figure out why things went wrong. And then you build a framework around it and figure out, okay, I'm not going to make this specific mistake again, right? So whether it's a failed product launch, whether it's a failed product itself, whether it's a failed stint at a company, right? Where, spend 2 years, you walk away from it feeling like, I wish I could have done more. Things could have been better. Sure, there were variables that were not in your hands, but you could have done a better job. You have to, one of the key things that PMs have to do, so, one is, a lot of people think that PMing is very reactive in nature, which it is, because you have to react real time to what's happening. But there is a part of it which is, you sit back and you look over both your successes and failures and truly see if they were successes and failures. What would happen is that sometimes a lot of things which look like successes would actually not be your successes. You just got lucky, or the market was just right. Something just exploded, right? The time for that idea had come and you just happened to be in the right place at the right time. So it's not really your success, right? And similarly, with failures, you can realize that, sure, you messed up and you messed up big time, and but you can also realize that, hey, the market was not right. The idea was premature. We did not do our homework correctly, right? And if you're able to pinpoint the thing that went wrong and why it went wrong, then you can fix it in future. You can actually ensure. So, it's like the shots at goal philosophy, right? So if you look at and I'll answer this more on a professional level, right? Like, I expect to work till the day I die, right? And I hope to live to 200. So I have another 170 odd years to sort of play this field, right? So it's that Michael Jordan line, right? That I've missed 3,000 shots and I've hit the buzzer. Many people just remember the times when I hit the buzzer and sort of dunked the basket, but people forget the times when I missed that last shot, right? And I think that's that level of persistence, right? I think over a long enough career, you will have a lot of failures. There is no such thing as a lot of successes, right? It will be ups and downs, ups and downs. Hopefully your successes are really, really big and your failures are very small, right? But the truth is your failures will equally be large failures, right? They would push your career back by a few years. They could destroy a little bit of hard-earned credibility that you might have in the market. It's very difficult to walk out of a bad situation with your credibility intact. Seldom happens, right? But again, the point is you live to fight another day and you don't make the same mistake again. I think that's the key part. How do you keep evolving, keep becoming better, and just ensure that you don't make the same mistakes? I've had a lot of failures, right? I think I've learned more from them and I know it's a very cliched thing to say, but I have definitely learned a lot more from my failures than from my successes.
And it sounds like almost those keep you grounded in reality in a way. You don't get too carried away when you're successful and then not go into this cycle of depression when you're failing.
One of my favorite books, for which a lot of my friends make fun of me. So there's this book called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, and she's a very famous poker player. And she says this thing that good poker players know that when they win, it's very likely that they won because they got lucky and not because they were very skilled. And when other people win, it's not because they got lucky, but because they were very good at it. So as a PM, you have to keep remembering that your failures are your own. You failed because you were not good enough. But when you win, you also have to keep reminding yourself, I also got a bit lucky. Right? Things were right. The time for this idea had come. I got lucky with a really good team. I have a very good engineering counterpart. Right? I had a lot of support from everyone. Lots of things.
And I think the undercurrent there also was...
It's like, no PM can really take credit for Zoom's success right now.
Yes, true.
You've built a great product. See, you can take credit for the fact that over the years you've built this phenomenal product, right? Which everyone can use. But dude, who expected this situation to happen? Who expected Zoom to hit 300 million daily active users? No one did, right? If I had asked you in January that Zoom would be one of the most used consumer apps and would hit number one, right, on Play stores, you'd be like,
Are you kidding?
okay, are you kidding me? I'll bet my left kidney and right kidney that I could win that, right? And would have lost, right? But this is an external factor. They got, I mean, they've got lucky, but the thing is they were prepared for that luck. And which is where their success is completely theirs. They should own their success, and the PMs and the designers and the people at Zoom should own that success because they had built a wonderful product and they'd done all the hard work to get it to a place where when an external event caused this massive boom, they were ready for it.
Nice. So I'm going to quickly shift focus from early product management to growth. I think some of the products that we love to use and continue to use have grown really well, like Practo and Hotstar. I need not even tell, one of the fastest growing and biggest OTT platforms in India. So how did you start building this growth engine, and what do you think about it? Especially in terms of, let's talk about, how did you strategize in this particular ecosystem, especially the entertainment, the OTT segment? How did you, go about building that?
No, I think so. I'll give a more generic answer to that. Giving it specific for the OTT entertainment space is again, there are a lot of other factors at play, right?
We have. So yeah, we'll cover that later. But let's talk about.
I'll give a little bit of. I'll flesh that out, right? Like we have IPL rights, we have BCCI rights, we have ICC rights. That means you are the only destination for cricket in the country. So a lot of the growth is already assured, right? So growth becomes easier because you've already spent a lot of money and effort into carving out that niche for yourself, right? So that's one way of approaching growth, right? But I'll give a more generic framework, right? When you're thinking of growth, when you're thinking of building a product that people really want to use, that has crossed sort of that product market fit stage, right? It has found a market, it is being used, people are paying for that service, or you are able to monetize, and then now you're sort of growing, right? And there the growth is very, very heavily dependent on, right, that sort of your ability to get it to people at a far cheaper rate than the money that you're going to make on it. My strong sort of consideration for people always is, what always hurts me a little bit is that when we think of growth stage in the absence of business fundamentals, right? Which is that, hey, it's easy to take $100 million from someone and drop it on growth, right? And get 50 million users or 100 million users. And, what you've built is a leaky bucket and they'll all disappear, right? So I think for me, it's very, very clear that there are certain steps which need to have been done really, really well before you reach the growth phase, right? Where you say, okay, I've built a Ferrari. This engine can take anything, right? Now give me a runway, right? Build me the best runway in the world, and I will break this, the high-speed record, right? So growth is about building the runway, but you already have a Ferrari, right? And I think what people forget is they think that growth is about building a growth product. Growth, the product is already there, and of course the product will become better. You will put out the next version of your engine and you'll keep making your product better. But growth is about building the runway. You've built a great plane, you've built a great engine, you've built a great race car, but now you're going and building the path for it, right? You're cracking distribution, you're cracking monetization, you're cracking a whole bunch of things. You're figuring out how to get your product in, if you're a consumer product, how to get your product in the hands of 100 million people. If you are a consumer tech, if you're a SaaS product or enterprise product, now is when you're saying, I will build the best sales team in the world who will ensure that every single enterprise uses my product, because my product is just that good, but it requires your product to be just that good. PMF is very, very critical. Product market fit and a much higher bar. You're no longer at MVP stage. You have a solid product.
I think when 0 to 1 is like the whole PMF is very it's an art. You have to keep trying, just have the right strategy, and the timing, like you told, it's unpredictable. But the market is forgiving you. The cycles keep changing, and it's always you can get back on the horse even if it doesn't work the first few times.
Yeah.
And I think that to myself.
And again, sort of, I don't know whether that's a good analogy or a bad analogy, but if we take that race car analogy and the racetrack, the conditions on the racetrack then tell you, oh, I need to have better tires. Right? So you keep making changes to your product, right? Like that growth phase then informs you, right? Your sales cycle will inform you that, hey, people are demanding this particular feature, right? Our competitors have this feature. Why don't we have this feature, right? Or a consumer product, you realize that, everything is fine, but we need this, right? So of course, the whole growth phase also informs how your product is built. But growth is about building the runway, not the engine.
Nice, very nicely put. I think one of the follow-ups I have from one of our members, Shruti. Shruti asks, growth and monetization strategy for your ecosystem. How did you, balance growth and monetization? And a follow-up for that as well is, how are you balancing user experience and monetization in the same regard? This like being a product leader is a balancing act between when do I crack and go after getting more users, and when do I monetize them?
Actually, so I'll take the second part of that question, right, which is how do you balance between monetization and user experience? And the point is, you don't balance. It is one and the same thing. You cannot have a product which monetizes which has poor user experience. And I know it's easier said than done, because when you're building your monetization rails, you are actually sort of compromising your user experience. But in the short term you might monetize, but in the long term your product would fail. So depending on what kind of monetization you have, if you have ads driven monetization, your fundamental product has to be great, because if its engagement is not fantastic and people are not spending enough time on it, you don't have enough inventory to sell. Right? So if your user experience is not great, people would really hate the ads. If your user experience is great, people are like, okay, I'm okay with seeing these ads, right?
Makes sense.
If yours is a product where people pay money to use the product itself, they're not going to pay money if it's a shitty product. So according to me, monetization is completely connected to user experience. There's no such thing as bad user experience and great monetization.
Well, point noted. So without much ado, I so far I've been asking you for some of the pre-submitted questions from our members, and just FYI, we collected questions, like I told you, from Twitter. When people registered for this event, we got them to submit some questions, and we also got it through our community, which is something we are launching in beta right now. But I'm going to quickly shift to some of the questions that are submitted on Slido before going back to more of the pre-submitted questions. So I'm going to share my screen real quick.
Sure.
So these are the questions, and in case some of them are already answered, you can just skip them over. So are you ready for the quickly answering some random questions from the web? Here we go.
You want me to read out the question, or you're going to read out the question?
I'll read it out. So
sure.
It's an anonymous question, the first one. How much growth should be product-led versus paid outbound? I believe he's talking about paid acquisition. Rather, how much percentage do you budget for paid and outbound? In any generic example?
Again, it's a difficult question to answer, because there's no fixed ratio to this, right? Look, even paid and outbound growth has to be product-led, right? So I have a very contrarian view to this. I think product marketing teams and product teams should be combined in most startups. Very seldom. See, if you're a very if your marketing is very above the line kind of marketing, your marketing is sort of led by television ads and newspaper ads and radio ads. Sure, that's very classic outbound. Because if you have the kind of product which now needs just this gasoline to sort of really light it up, go for it. But if your marketing is actually sort of very online paid, marketing which sort of directly gets the users to your product, I think product has to be involved. So I would actually always err on the side of product-led marketing, right? So building out a really good a system where users can invite other users to the product, right? Where you can give out some freebies and sort of make sure that other people can enjoy the product, or a social growth-led product, right? So find different product as a PM, and I'm not sure if the person who's asking this question is a founder or is a PM, but as a PM, I think PMs should own this aspect of marketing. You should not own television ads or newspaper ads. That's not your skill set, right? Have like a strong marketing team which does that. But I think as far as sort of online digital marketing is concerned, right, where your job is to get people to your website or to your app, and then you have to get them to use it. I think it's something that product-led, product-first approach is a much better approach.
Nice. Very well said. So the next question is from Arzu Sharma. Across your past experiences, are there any behavioral patterns you've noticed with respect to designing digital products specifically for Indian consumers? You're going to love this question. I think I read a blog about you about this.
Yeah. So I've written a lot about designing products for India. Okay, so I'll try and keep this short because I could go on for this for like the rest of the evening. No. So here's the interesting thing, right? India is a country where we love to skip steps. And if you look at the growth of anything, right, the way we are as a country, we're still a fairly young country, right, in terms of like post-independence. But our growth is always incredibly slow in the first few years of any new cycle, right? So whether it's the tech cycle, whether it's the telecom cycle, whether it's coming online, we were incredibly slow. And then boom, Geo, right? Or no payments, UPI, right? So we love step function jumps. We are very slow in going from A, B, C, D, and then we sort of love to skip E, F, G, H and directly jump to sort of the middle of the alphabet, right? So this, by the way, is a very, very Indian tendency also, which means that we are slow to start, but then we make mental jumps. Our mental jumps are very sort of step function jumps. And this is true of Indian consumers, right? So we suddenly go from years of nobody knowing how to use a mobile phone to suddenly everyone going to a place where mobile phones are so ubiquitous and using a mobile phone is so has become such a deep part of our DNA that products which we would have never thought were successful in India would suddenly become very successful. And my favorite example, and I've given this multiple times, right? So I build digital products, right? One of the features so if I want to do a single threaded reply in WhatsApp, right? I want to give a reply to, so Nachi and I are say chatting, and to maintain context, I want to reply to a specific comment of his. I used to hard press that and then click reply and then go down and type the reply. My mother, who is, who did not grow up using technology products and who's only over the last few years started using a mobile phone and sort of a smartphone, one day was sitting right next to me, and while I was doing this, and she tapped me on the hand and said, just swipe. And I realized that if there is a comment from Nachi and if I swipe it, it automatically goes to write mode. Now this is embarrassing, right? When your mother, right, who knows a particular design pattern, right? This is a new design pattern where you can swipe on objects and it leads to actions, right? So easy thing to reply is just like swipe on a card and you can immediately get into the replying window. And this was beautiful. And I asked her, how did she learn it? And my mother's a teacher. She's been teaching for many, many years. She said one of my students taught it. So I was sitting in the teacher's room and something happened and my student saw this. And that's how I realized that, this is how Indians learn it, right? There are mothers out there who are learning it from their kids, right? There are grandmothers out there who are learning things from their grandkids. So we take step function jumps from not knowing what the word swipe means. We swipe away. She still doesn't know what swiping means, right? Like if I make a Tinder joke, she wouldn't know it, right? But she knows what the swipe functionality is, right? And all of India works in these beautiful step function jumps. So the problem is now, if you're a designer or if you're somebody building products, in your head you have this notion of, oh, Indian users can't do this, or Indian users only know how to do this, and you sit on your ass and you don't do anything for 6 months or 1 year, and the whole country passes you by, right? Suddenly, a very dominant product comes into the market, right? Everyone knows that sharing means share on WhatsApp, right? I love share chat when they changed that, the three dot share symbol to the WhatsApp symbol.
WhatsApp symbol, yeah.
Yeah, they're like, dude, every user will share on WhatsApp, so just put the WhatsApp logo right there. It's such a beautiful product inside, right? Because that's become the lingua franca of the people, right? WhatsApp is so dominant as a product in the Indian market that anything that can happen on WhatsApp can be easily adopted into any other product. Now, if you're sitting and thinking, no, I don't want to put a share button and I don't want to put WhatsApp, you're just being silly, right? So keeping track of what your consumers are doing, Indian consumers go extremely slowly and then do these massive step function jumps. And if you as a designer or a product manager miss that step function jump, you're doomed. Your product will die a very swift death.
And that is why you have to have very less of an ego and say, okay, this is customer reality. We are just going to adapt to it.
Absolutely.
It's not rational.
PMs should not have egos. Like PMs and designers should keep their egos aside, right? There is no such thing as I built that. Like, no. Users wanted something. Users are already far ahead of you. Give users a lot of credit. I think one of the things we in India are really bad at is that India is not one country. It's a country of many countries. Our demography is very, very divided. We have very poor understanding. My biggest gripe in life is that Indian PMs and Indian designers know nothing about India, right? And we keep thinking about making world-class products, but we barely are able to build a good product for India. So, and Indian users are leaving us far behind. Indian users are leaving Indian product managers far behind, because global products will come into India and they'll dominate the hell out of us, because Indian users will adapt to them very, very fast.
Nice. And so just to add to a little bit of what you said, and to audience out there, and this is a Hotstar report. The largest number of users we see watching more time online were from the Bihar, West Bengal belt, or the Bihar, Jharkhand, and West Bengal, and that was surprising to me. And Apptopia or App Annie released this report where the top downloaded app or most active user app in India at the time was a Bhojpuri songs app. And as a PM, I'm looking at it and going, wow, this I would have never imagined. I would have thought metros would beat, the far remote areas, but no, not really. And that changes how we think and how do we etch the next set of features.
Yeah, this is the classic step function jump, right? The tier 2 markets in India, the rural markets in India are right now going through those massive step function jumps.
Right? And if you miss that, then it's a foolishness in hindsight.
Absolutely, right? You would feel so foolish that suddenly the entire rural population of India, right, added an extra 100 million users, and they were all craving great content, great features, great products. They wanted to spend their time. Data was cheap for them, and you were not there. You were not ready for them. And some app was ready. Some guy sitting in a small room built out a great music app which had Bhojpuri music in it, right? I love that. I just absolutely love that, right? That's something that all the big music apps in India would have missed.
Missed it, yeah. Cool. So we'll go to the next question. It's an anonymous question again, which is tips for a PM who is moving to manage the product as a founder. Since it's pre-PMF, a lot of ambiguity, specific points on team, roadmaps, planning, and tools. So we're talking about how PMF was an art. I think he wants us to elaborate a little bit on that in a tactical level.
So I'm just trying to understand the question better. They're saying, what if the PM happens to be the founder of the company?
Yeah, I mean, as a founder company, he is the product founder. And it's a PMF, so there's a lot of ambiguity. What are the specific things he could do, especially on teams, roadmaps, planning, etc.?
All that is faff. You just have to focus on one thing. Do your homework. Understand who your user is. You have to answer two big questions. Why are you the right person to build this product? And why would users care if you build this product? Mm-hmm. Everything else will fall into place. Answer these two questions. You will have your product roadmap. Your team will have a North Star to chase. And everything will fall into place, right? Sure, you'll still have to do the work, but I'm saying most people get into road mapping and user interviews and sort of building a product because somebody had a great bright idea without actually validating any of their thesis, right? So go validate your thesis. Figure out why would users care, right? So when you're that early, you have to do your homework. It's a classic Indian problem. Given a question paper, we immediately start answering it. Read the question paper first. See which questions you actually care about. Which questions can you answer in the first 10 minutes, and then sort of focus on the problems that you don't know, right? All good engineers do this, right? All good engineers do this, right? They don't start coding immediately. They really delve into the problem, because they know that the final solution is a 20-line piece of code, and they can type it out in like 2 minutes. But first, figure out the problem. Good PMs should do that too. Take your time, answer the why questions, right? And do your homework. Then get into everything else.
And in summary, keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. And that's probably the answer for the next question if I'm reading the question paper right, which is, when you have just launched a new product and are a small team, what framework can be used to maintain long-term feature map, which you just said. It's fact. Just focus on one thing, do it well, keep it simple. So I'm going to skip that. Where next comes Rajiv with a question: leading with authority and leading with influence. What's the right mix? And when would you choose one over the other? Anshu, they're asking for your secret sauce.
Yeah, man. So I fall into the second category, which is influence, right? My style of, sounds very high flying, sort of. My style of leadership. No, it's not that. It's just when you're responsible for leading a team, and other people are looking at you. I think the way you do it is you build a lot of credibility with them. You work very closely with them, especially in the early days. You sort of get a sense of who they are, what they are. Are they aligned? Are you able to build a good roadmap for them? Are you able to sort of sell your vision to them, right? So a lot of it is influence, I think. So I keep saying this, that building consensus is the single biggest thing that PMs do, which is not the same as it becoming a democracy, by the way. I think what people confuse the two things is, and I'm guessing where this question is coming from, right? There is the leading with authority. Authority is essentially telling people, we will do this. And then everyone falls in line and you do this, right? And influence is, this is the path. This is where we are going. Let's figure out the best way of getting there, right? And convincing everyone that this is the right path, and convincing everyone that, more importantly, that is the right destination. The path might be different, but that's the destination, because if everyone agrees on the destination, paths can be figured out, right? Which is why I think your authority actually will come from your influence, not the other way around. You can be authoritative and have zero influence. And over time, that just essentially means that then you have to be the smartest person in the team, which is in general a really bad idea. I don't want to be the smartest person on the team. That puts the entire pressure of coming up with smart things and interesting things on me. I'm not going to solve my engineers' problems, right? My engineers have to be smarter than me. My designers have to be smarter than me. So what that means is I have to use my ability to convince them and influence them to get their smartness to work.
Yeah, I think almost talking about servant leadership, where you work to make sure everybody is doing their 100% and be successful.
Absolutely, right? Like there are people who have found success with the authority way, because they're incredibly smart people. They figure out like, okay, this is what has to be done. This is a roadmap. I've hired all of you, so I don't expect any of you to sort of like argue with me unnecessarily. Just go chase this, right? That's never worked for me. That's never worked for me, at least.
I mean, I've never seen any product leader also allude to that, saying that doesn't scale either for them. They want to make sure they have smart people delegated to them, and they're kind of doing the tweaking and building the tracks for the future ahead.
Yeah, but what I said is still true. You're still not. It's not a democracy. You're still the PM. You're still the decision maker, and people are doing what you're telling them to do. But the step is that you convince everyone. You bring everyone along. You let everyone disagree, but you make them commit.
Nice. So I think we'll take another one question from Slido before that. After that, I want to go into hiring and culture questions, especially if you are hiring in this time of COVID. Controversial question. I'll keep it at the end. So Kunal Gupta asks, how do you baseline a number to make sure that you have a good MAU, good retention for your product? I will skip the what metric I used at Hotstar because I don't want you disclosing anything you don't want to disclose. But
Sure.
he's talking about benchmarking. We talked about it earlier. You said, okay, make sure these are good. But what does good mean? Is 20% DAU or 20% MAU good?
Yeah.
Is 30% DAU good? What is the magic numbers for you?
Yeah, totally depends on the kind of project the product that you have, right? Again, something that I answered earlier. Have a very good sense of what activity you're referring to when you refer to an active user, right? So if it's hopefully it's not app open, right? If you have a product, it has to be a specific activity which matters to you and your company, right? Which strengthens your product, which shows that your product is healthy. And then, okay, so then it's essentially ratios, right, which work. It's never really DAU alone or MAU alone, but it's something like the ratio of DAU to MAU or DAU to WAU. Then you look at things like how often are people using your product? What is their retention? What is the day 1 retention? What is the D7 retention? What is the D30 retention? And again, all of this depends very, very closely on the type of product. So, if you have a direct to consumer product, you have a consumer tech product, there are a certain set of metrics that you should look at. If you're an enterprise product, you think about this very differently. If you're a SaaS product, you think about this very differently, right?
We're still talking about benchmarking. I think the question is alluding to, where do you find what is a good one? Let's take, video.
So you have to look at the market, right? You have to look at who you're competing with, who's the most successful in your domain, right? And try and figure out. Ask around with 10 people how much time they spend on that product, what their engagement is, how often do they find themselves. Then this is an exercise you can do easily. I mean, sure, you can use things like App Annie and a bunch of other benchmarking tools, right, which will tell you exactly, say, what somebody's DAU is, what somebody's MAU is, what their engagement retention is, right? I'm sure those numbers are useful, but there is a lot of qualitative stuff that you can do to figure out how deeply engaging are these products. Especially in the world of games, for example, it's very easy to figure out, wow, this group of people always is playing this game and they spend a lot of time, right? Like, PUBG is a success in India when everywhere you turn, somebody's playing PUBG and it's a 15-minute session. And that in a day you've seen them at least play that 15-minute sessions 3-4 times, which means they are spending at least a bare minimum of 60 minutes playing PUBG a day. But you've also seen them playing it every single day. That's magic, right? They're spending 30 days a month playing that game in 60 minutes a day. That's like 2,000 minutes. That's just bonkers, right? So, that's the benchmark. So if you are saying, I'm making a AAA console quality title, right, and I'm going to compete with PUBG and I'm going to spend $20 million and spend 3 years and make a phenomenal game, then that's your benchmark, right? So again, depends on the kind of product, the market, but I think benchmarking is actually pretty easy. Just look at the kind of users you're building the product for and see how often you find them using the product. So again, do your homework. Going back to
very aptly qualitatively speaking, what you're alluding to is like understand their natural frequency. If you're a
Correct.
food ordering app, understand that people will eat 3 to 4 times a day, and what portion will they order, and what portion can you make them order if you add other things to your product. And if they watch video, how many hours do they watch a video? And what like Netflix and Hotstar kind of companies do, they say, okay, now what portion of their watch can we occupy, and what do we need to do?
Yeah. What portion of their mind space do you want? Do you want to carve out, right? They could be doing 200 different things. How do you ensure that they spend that time on your product?
Perfect. So I'm going to go off of Slido now and ask some of the pre-submitted questions, but this will be the hiring and culture part. I think earlier we were talking about your early journey as a product manager. And at one point, you were thrust into this, the role of leading teams. How did that transition happen from an individual contributor into a leadership track? How did you feel about that?
So for me, it happened earlier, right? From game designer, I went to a general manager, right? Like I ran my own game studio. So building a team and sort of hiring people happened actually before, and building the product and hiring product managers and leading. So I've sort of, my individual contributor track has actually happened. And it's always the case, right? That you are 1 step up and 3 steps down. So you could be a product leader and you could lead 50 people, 100 people, 500 people, doesn't matter. you are also involved in actually hands-on building the product, and that's sort of a critical part of being a product leader. So yeah, so I think, as I said, I lucked out, and for me that was always a status that right from the beginning. I joined Zynga India at a very early stage. We were building out Zynga India, so I was involved in hiring. I was involved in building out the studio, and then of course building out my own game studio. So that skill set got imbibed pretty early on in my cycle.
Nice. I think one other question that we have on the hiring and culture part is from both Dallin Mendoka and Neeraj Hirani. They're asking, how is your org designed and structured? How do you go about building your teams, and and how do you make sure that the different teams, maybe growth or maybe different areas like social viewing versus core, social experience and core viewing, they don't kind of clash or compete with each other? How do you set up a very collaborative organization?
So the way to think about, there's a lot of material and there's a lot written about sort of things like pod structures and everything, right? By the way, the company that sort of came up with pod structures has moved on from pod structures. People don't realize that Spotify no longer uses pod structures.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Spotify actually evolves its org structure pretty much every year. So if you speak to people at Spotify, they said, yeah, that was our structure last year. Org structure should always be a work in progress. I think they take you through different phases of your journey. I think there are a few fundamental truths that you should adhere to. So for me, it's what are the 2 or 3 things that you want to achieve as an organization? And these could be business goals and these could be product goals. And you don't see those changing. So something like, hey, monetization through ads is not going to change because that's sort of something that we will always do. Mm-hmm. Or you say that growth and retention will always be North Star metrics for us. Making sure that our product has great D1 retention and D30 retention and D6 month retention, and M6 retention is always going to be a goal that we chase. So now if you look at it, right, the health metric dashboard that we spoke about early on, that these are the 5 things that I look at. So if I'm the product leader of the company and these are the 5 things I care for, I need to have 5 dedicated teams on these things. So things which will always remain true or will remain true for at least a few years or the next couple of quarters, that these things are fundamental to who you are at that point of time, require dedicated teams to chase. Then there are midterm to short-term goals that you have. And usually those goals can align across these teams that you have built or can be heavily bracketed into one single team. So for example, if you already had a payments team and you are building out a new subscription product, building out the subscription product is a short-term sort of 3, 6 month, 9 month goal. It can very, very happily sit inside the payments team. But the fact that you will always have a payments team is important to you because you're a transactional product. So you always need to have a great payments team who is able to handle large volumes of payments, right? So individual projects can come and go and metrics can be aligned to them. But the fact that a payments team needs to exist is a fundamental truth, at least for 3-4 years, maybe more.
And then keep experimenting, keep tweaking it. That's like the key message there.
So think about what are the fundamentals of your business. For each of the fundamentals, you need to have dedicated teams. You need to have dedicated owners and leaders, right? And you need to have dedicated teams. They need to have the firepower to go and achieve that, right? So they should not have shared engineers. They should not have shared designers, right? That doesn't work. Give them dedicated people, give them dedicated resources to really, really go after this. And if you realize, no, this doesn't require dedicated resources, then it's not a fundamental to chase. If you're not convinced that something should not be a standalone team, then it means that it's not something which is a fundamental standalone goal that you would chase at least for the next 1 or 2 years. Mm-hmm. Then put it under some other pod or make it a more horizontal layer across things.
Nice. So I think I could not cover all the questions that people asked. So I think we spoke backstage as well. So Anshumani said he will drop by from time to time. So we just opened up our community, so you can actually post your questions in our AMA thread there. For that, you can go to community.productgrowth.org. We're hitting almost at the 7 o'clock mark, so I want to just ask a couple of final questions. But I do want to know, this doesn't end here. You can come back to community, post your questions, and Anshumani, maybe you can visit in the following week, maybe a couple of times, and answer those questions there. Thank you so much for doing that. Okay, controversial question coming up. A lot of us are worried about, what will happen to product managers post this, the lockdown. They're expecting an economic downturn. So the two parts of the question: what do you think will be the general hiring, in market like for product people in the coming days? And more controversial, or I don't know, I'm putting you on a spot. Are you hiring, or will you be? Do you see yourself hiring in the next 6 to 8 months?
I'll answer the first question first. I think, product managers are not going anywhere. The reality is people will lose their jobs. I think a lot of engineers are losing their jobs. I'm surprised PMs are not. I haven't heard of a lot of PMs losing their jobs, but a lot of engineers have lost their jobs because people have sort of fundamentally realized that an entire unit or a entire sort of set of things that they were doing are no longer relevant for their survival. So that entire team is getting dropped, right? This will happen, right? This too shall pass. Companies fail all the time. Layoffs happen all the time. We are seeing layoffs happen at a much larger scale, right? I think for younger people out there, my only advice is that getting kicked out from your job is not the worst thing that will ever happen to you. Believe me, it's probably the best thing that happens to you, right? Getting laid off is not a bad thing. I know layoffs they come as a shock because all of us feel like, hey, I'm really good. I'm really good at what I do. Why did I get laid off, right? It's essentially like any bad breakup. You always ask the question, why me? And that's exactly what is true of losing your job, right? Even if it's in a scenario like this, even if somebody says, hey, COVID and 3,000 other people are losing their jobs, you are one of them, and you're like, why am I one of those 3,000 people and not the other 10,000 people who are keeping their jobs? And you will need your time and space to sort of think about this, but it's okay. Losing your job is not the worst thing that will happen to you. Life is far more interesting and beautiful than getting a job and losing a job, right? So I think first get that fear out of your mind. And this is true not just of PMs, but of everyone. 2, this is going to lead to some very interesting things. This might perhaps finally give you the push to do things that you always wanted to do. This might help you become a better PM. This might push you towards becoming a PM. So if you're an engineer and you always thought you wanted to be a PM, then this is a great time to actually figure that out. Nachi knows I'm very bullish on the fact that there is going to be a cohort of companies called the COVID companies, right? Companies which just started before this catastrophe hit us, and companies which will be founded in the aftermath of this. And I believe that 10 years from now, some of these companies will be the most valuable companies in the world. We would look back and say, man, that company started during that phase in world's history, and look how strong it is, right? Because I think whenever situations like these happen, great things happen. Now, are you a part of that journey? So if you were in a job that you really loved and you're losing that job, or you're not able to find a job that you really, really want, right? It's okay. Take a step back and try and sort of look through that globe and try and see the future. What is the kind of job that you could take up right now? Where could you be a PM, right? Which might do really, really well. The world has already pushed you towards the brink. Jump.
Nice.
My advice always is that jump, right? Like, see, if you are very far away from the edge, it's very difficult to get you to jump because you're very safe and secure. You're not going to take risks. But the world is pushing you towards the brink. So either you run back up, if you have the ability, do that, sure. But there's nothing wrong in jumping, right? I think.
No, keep
going. Yeah. So yeah, I think interesting things will happen. You might be in a very safe and secure, larger organization, and this situation is suddenly making you feel like, am I doing the right thing? And you can jump into an early stage startup. You might have lost your job and you might think about starting up. This is a great time to actually transition into a different kind of a role, right? I mean, if you're not going to do it now, when else can you do it? We're already at the bottom. Can't go worse than this, no? Fingers crossed. Hopefully can't go worse than this.
Let's be the fingers crossed. Knock on wood, fingers crossed. Green.
But my point is that, like, if there's only one way right now, and that's up, right?
Okay. The second part. I still want you to answer the second part of the question. I'm getting.
I think people will. I think companies that are doing well and that are growing will keep hiring people, right? Like growth stage companies and companies that are exploding will keep hiring. Will keep getting the right kind of people in. There'll always be opportunities, and there'll always be. We've not stopped hiring in any way right now.
And I'm sorry I'm pushing you on this again, but in the next 6 to 8 months, do you see yourself personally hiring for your teams? Given that Hotstar has been doing great.
I mean, if there are roles that we really need, and if there are places where we, want to expand and grow, we will hire people. I mean, there's no such thing as not hiring people. This is a setback. It's a temporary blip, but I think business will go on. It's business as usual, right? For a lot of companies, it's business as usual.
Nice. But I think a lot of other questions would be on that I've gotten is on what do you look for when you're hiring people, or what are your favorite interview questions and techniques, which I will post on the forum, and I think it's better suited to answer in the forum. And I think I'll be getting a lot of CVs which I'll forward to you as well.
Absolutely.
I think we've over the time we had already scheduled for. So I just wanted to not want to take more of your time. So thank you so much for going deeply and answering a lot of questions from your past, from how you do things today, and what you see in the future. I do want to wish you, your team, and the entire organization of Hotstar luck and all the very best in the time going forward. Looking forward to catching up with you again in another session like this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nachi, for asking great questions. Loved answering them. Had a great time. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.
And again, anyone who wants to join the product growth community, I've just shared the link below. For a brief amount of time, I want to keep the community also open so you can come and register as well. But that will be closed soon. And if you want to apply, you can use this link and send it as well. Do join us there. We can ask more questions, get more answers, and I'll be posting all the questions from here there as well. And you can also share your experiences, your feedback on the questions, and let's continue this conversation. It's not a one and done thing. And as a group of PMs and product people professionals in growth, marketing, so there's a lot of things we can share amongst each other. I think we should continue doing that and learn from each of our experiences and try to make all of us better as a community. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for all the 50 plus to 70 plus people who stayed throughout the stream. Apologies for going a little over time, but I hope you enjoyed it. We both will see you at another place another time, and definitely you'll see me back again hosting another AMA or a masterclass next time around. See you soon. Follow us on Twitter for more updates. Thank you.
Bye-bye.